I'm Carter Felker from Calgary, Alberta, and you're listening to the Northern Report.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends. Welcome to the Northern Report podcast. I'm your host, Sean Burns, and I'm coming right at you from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Here on the Northern Report, I aim to shine a light on emerging and existing Canadian talent, as well as some of the legends we're still lucky to have with us. My guest on today's show is Carter Felker. Carter and I have been pals now for a few years, but over the last year or so, we've kept in much closer contact. As you'll hear, our rapport is evident, and I feel like Carter was the perfect subject for the Northern Report's very first face-to-face interview. 29 episodes in, and we finally get to sit down across the table with someone and have a conversation. Now, before we get down to business, I'd just like to take a moment, send out one more thanks to all the folks who have been tuning in with me on Boots and Saddle every Tuesday on CKUW 95.9 FM for these past 5.5 years. Special thanks to all the folks who reached out with kind words and messages following my final episode as host. It means a lot, folks. Episode 236 aired on Tuesday, May 31st. It was an emotional endeavor recording that one for me. Do stay tuned to the Boots and Saddle socials for updates on the franchise and its future. I'm going to let it breathe a little while before doing anything more with Boots and Saddle. But I'll remind you, the archived episodes are still up there on the Spotify, Apple, and Google podcasts, or at bootsandsaddle.ca. And although CKUW has not yet and likely will not search for a new host for the program, they will continue to air Boots and Saddle rebroadcasts in the coming months. I'm currently back out on the road, slinging the harmonica, the upright and electrical bass guitars with Cor Blund and the Hurtin' Albertans. And folks, it's been a real pleasure and truly an honor rolling around with these dudes all over the US and at home across Canada. Find myself here this evening recording the intro in a 3-star hotel on the fringes of downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And I should mention that though the Northern Report column continues to be featured in the Honky-Tonk Times magazine, go to thehonkytonktimes.com to get your subscription. It's been 3 months since we last released a new podcast, so it feels real good to bring you a fresh episode. Friends, I hope you'll enjoy my chat with Carter Felker. Carter Felker's Alberta roots run deep, and he has hung his hat and kicked his boots off all over Wild Rose Country. It wasn't until he relocated from Grand Prairie down to Calgary that he began his path as a working musician. Felker burst onto the scene and turned heads with his debut record, Everyday Life, in 2016. He quickly rose the ranks, becoming one of the most respected names in the vibrant Alberta independent roots music scene. Beyond the provincial borders, folks across Canada, in the know and with their ears to the ground, took note of his elite songwriting talent. And it wasn't long before other notable Prairie names like Barber and Shaela Miller each took their own stab at recording songs from Carter's pen. Carter's new album, Even the Happy Ones Are Sad, will be out into the world this Tuesday, June 14th. And I'll tell you, friends, he does not suffer from a sophomore slump. I've been lucky to have an advanced copy of the record for quite a while now, and I cannot overstate it enough when I say you should be sure to take the time to give this record a listen. There's been a pair of singles released already, and at the conclusion of today's episode, we're going to give you the world premiere of another great cut from this record with a song called Francine. Carter joined me last month when I was in Calgary in room 807 at the Alt Hotel to tell me more about his story, his songs, and his new record. We'll jump right into it, discussing what's become a polarizing matter, Carter's signature song, Everyday Life.
I work down at the grocery store.
Yeah, I'll talk about it honestly.
Yeah. Because it must be weird.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, the weirdest thing about it is, like, being like, yeah, I wrote this song, and then you, like, hear somebody who's like, I love this song, and then they change the song, and you're like, okay, well, I wonder what it's going to sound like. And then you hear it, and then it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, and then you get, like, someone like my dad's like, that fucking song. He's like, that's not the song. And my dad's, like, grocery store clerk, right? Like, ran Safeway for eons, and I watched him toil away at, like, not in the dirt, but in the dust, as they say, of a grocery store. But then, and then you're like, okay, I just won't listen to it. And then, I go to a show or whatever, and then I listen to it. I'm like, that's not the same song. It's a different song with some of the same words, which is like, whatever.
Same melody.
A lot prettier.
Yes. Well, yeah, he's got a beautiful voice.
Yeah, but it's also cool. Like, you're like, it's cool, it's an honor or whatever. I don't have a lot of, buddies that have songs that are getting sung by other people or whatever, or on a, the Juno nominated record or whatever. That's really cool. And it's like, oh, your name's on the back of the record, and you're like, oh, look at that. You can show your kids that, but then, you send them to bed before you turn on the record or whatever, maybe.
When's the first time you heard Del sing your song?
The first time I ever heard it was actually like years ago. They used to have this thing called Wide Cut Country. Or Wide Cut Weekend was the festival. Wide Cut Country's still around. It's on CKUA. It's a radio show, but they did a festival, and I was at the Legion. And I was upstairs, and I was in the bathroom. I got a social anxiety, so I was on the toilet or whatever, and I washed my hands and walked out. And it was funny. My girlfriend and Shaela Miller were dancing in the front row, and Del goes, "This is a song my friend wrote. It's called Everyday Life." And Grant Siemens was with him. It was a hot band. And
Grant and Bernie, right?
Yeah. And they started playing it, and I was like, oh, cool. And then, they changed it, or I had never experienced somebody like changing something, like the folk tradition of changing tunes or whatever. And then I was like, oh shit, like, I didn't know how to react, and everyone was like, wow. And I was like, yeah, cool. And then I went home and cried a little, but also was like, that's kind of cool. Maybe I am a songwriter. There was some validation attached to it.
Yes.
But the first time I heard it was weird. And then the last time I heard it was weird. But at the same time, it's like, I got no hard feelings or anything like that. It's just like, yeah, like I said, you're like, it's like I said, it's like watching something that you created change. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, like, I don't know how else to describe it other than like, yeah, like, it's like, it's a weird feeling. It's somewhere between like complete validation and am I not good enough? Was this not good enough?
Right.
And it's like, it's still like one of my favorite songs I've ever written. Like, my version was, it's a lot more depressing too. And I joked to Del, I'm like, it's a philosophical moment. It's like, 5'7" bald troll boy with a skullet writes a song about being depressed, and this beautiful blue-eyed 6'2" left-handed god, like, who sings like an angel's like, well, this is how I would have done it. I'm like, yeah, maybe circumstances, right? But it's more of a joke now. But yeah, he still plays it at shows, so I mean, it stands up. I mean, and then, like, no offense to the rest of his records, but it's still one of his best songs.
Yeah. Well, did you know that he was doing that song before you first heard him play it that night at the Legion?
The first time he played it at the Legion, I can't remember, because I know I turned 27. It was my birthday, and it's all these moments happened in the shitter. It's weird. I was in the shitter, and I got this text from Del. He's like, I'm going to do Everyday Life, and here's my version. And I'm like, got it up to my ear while I'm on the toilet in the ship and anchor here. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, cool, whatever. It was pretty half cut. And I was like, well, I don't want you to change it. And he's like, well, I'm not changing it that much. And I was like, well, don't change the chorus. And he's like, well, then it doesn't tell the same story. And I'm like, I'm not going to argue anymore. It's my birthday. I'm tired and I'm drunk, and, it's a day of celebration. And then I I walked out to the table, and then a buddy of mine, Mike Dunn, was there, and he was like, like, it happens, man, like, take it as a compliment. And I was like, all right, yeah. And then I still do take it as a compliment. But whenever I talk about it, I'm like, well, I'm not going to be like dishonest about the fact that it is a strange feeling, but it's also like, yeah, like I said, I'm playing the middle, right? With that type of feeling where you're like, yeah, I'm like, there's days where I'm like, that's fucking awesome. And there's days where like, oh man, I must have had a really good idea, but I'm just not good enough to write it,
You ever see the movie Crazy Heart?
Yeah.
So that song for me, like, Dell's version is the Crazy Heart movie, and your version is the Crazy Heart book.
Yeah, there you go.
Where there's no glory at the end of the book.
Just
it's just
bleak,
sad, and
just screaming at God.
And that's why I like your tunes, man, because they feel really real like that. Like I have said this, I've been saying this a lot the last year or so, that like I think everybody feels misery and sadness, and maybe they bury it, or they're not in touch with it, or they don't want to welcome that feeling. But I feel like you write about that a lot.
Yeah, I try. Well, I guess
consciously.
Well, and I guess I don't consciously try. I feel like over the years I've gotten older, and I'm not old yet, but I look terrible. But the one thing that I notice with myself is like, yeah, the songs get slower and sadder, because it's like, my arc maybe, the hope isn't as, I'm plateauing out as a human being, where I'm like, what's my future? What's going on? And I'm like, well, I got a lot of years to live, so I can't really see the end. Maybe, maybe I'll get into IT and make $1 billion. I don't know. But it's like, yeah, I feel like everybody, it's like, and I always feel like, if as a writer, I'm always staying in a moment, and to get to the end and just be like, oh yeah, and here's a little hope. I'm like, well, I don't know, like, in 3.5 minutes, like, can you really grasp every emotion? Like a good story arc, a good short story, which is like, I feel like my songs are pretty much that, is, yeah, I guess I just, maybe I don't have the ability to resolve and find the light, because I'm pretty realistic that, I remember when I realized you just get older, you never really figure it out. You start to maybe get more responsible and take care of your shit, but that doesn't mean what you're doing.
Right.
Tomorrow, you might have a burst pipe in your house and you're fucking sunk, and you're like, oh man, I was ahead, and now I'm like, I'm way in debt. Mm-hmm. I had to pay a plumber so I didn't have to like foreclose on my own home because of, it's just disgusting, right? Like that's the stuff I see. I'm like, well, like something's coming. I don't know what it is, but it's a fucking freight train.
You're just waiting for something bad to happen?
Well, something bad will happen. Like no matter what, whenever shit's going good, like things go great. They're going great. There's always something. And even if it's a little leak in the boat, like, oh, this beer tastes good, but it still leaves a fucking glass ring,
Yeah, I've had a hard time accepting people congratulating me on, oh, you're gonna have a baby, or you've got this new gig, and then I'm like, yeah, but something's gonna happen.
Yeah, something's coming.
Happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He's like, my kid might not like me. I'll give it all the unconditional love it needs, and it might just be like, yeah, my dad, he chewed loud.
He's on the road all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Where's dad? Oh, he's trying. Yeah.
But you're not like a sad guy in social situations. Maybe you hide it. Maybe there's some anxiety. But I don't know, like most times you and I talk, it's
we got a lot of laughs.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got a sense of humor. I mean, that's like one thing that keeps me above the ground, I think. Like,
so do the songs sort of like, is that your outlet for all those?
Yeah,
all those feelings?
Yeah. I mean, for almost all my feelings. If you met my partner, she's like, Carter, you gotta like express yourself like emotionally more, because I'm like, there's bitch and whine. That's one thing that's real easy to do. You know me.
Yes.
But then there's like, I'll watch like the saddest movie and I'll be like, I feel terrible, and I just sit there, and then I'm like, well, I want a Big Mac or something, and then I'll watch a Marvel movie or an action movie and I'm like tearing up and crying at like these crazy scenes, because I'm like, wow, I never thought I'd see something like this on the television screen. Like I remember watching like Jurassic Park and being like, holy shit, like this is amazing, and now you see stuff, you're like, that's nothing now. Like, yeah. My brain is weird. I'm wired differently, I think. But emotionally, yeah, I'm like, okay, well, no. I remember one time when I was a kid, maybe 18 or whatever, I wrote this song about depression, and I played it for my mom, and she fucking lost her mind. She's like, you don't sing about that shit, you know, like you're not depressed or whatever. And I was like, no, I'm gonna keep singing these songs.
Yeah, they have a hard
because
time
it's like,
accepting
yeah,
that.
it's like the first time I ever expressed and got through to my own mom about like, yeah, I have questions and I'm not always happy, and you know, like, yeah, I think that's where it all comes out. And I also, you know, I put a lot of my own thoughts and feelings into these story songs. Like, you know, not everyone is a verbatim story about me,
Mm-hmm.
but there are feelings I'm feeling, and I'm just like using this as a canvas to emote them, I guess. I don't know.
There's bits of you in all these tunes.
Yeah, exactly, you know.
Even
like,
if they're not autobiographical.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, I don't know. Like sometimes I don't even know where these songs come from. I wake up some days, I'm like, I can't believe I fucking wrote that. Like, who wrote that song? Like, I'll reflect on songs I've had out or people talk about or ask me about, and I'm like, my process is just like, yeah, you know, channeling something. Not like I'm a religious person or spiritual by any means, but it's like I don't know what's going on in my brain that I'm so passive in my own existence and feeding the beast, which is art.
Uh-huh.
That at times I'm like, I don't know how I wrote that.
Do you like? Are you a everyday writer? Consciously wake up and write? Or are you like processing these emotions from the Marvel movie into song, or is it just something? Is something coming to you and you're like, I got to get the guitar?
Yeah, it's weird. Well, I've been with Amy, my partner, who's an amazing artist, and like you've seen her the last few nights with Corb, but she is like a poetry reader. Like I call it high end, you know. She's ingesting art, and I'm like, you know, on my back most of the day, like, fuck, I'm gonna watch the Jays game, and then I'll see what's on Netflix or whatever, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I'll do the dishes, and then she's like, okay, I'm gonna like go. We share a garden with her mom and dad, and she's like, I'm gonna go to my folks' place for 3 days, and then I'm like, well, I'm gonna fucking sit down with my guitar and hammer out something. Like, and it's weird because I'll get this idea. I'm like, that's a weird idea, or no, not every day. I'd say like maybe like once a week. I really sit down with the guitar, and then most of the time I'm either just like, it's like fishing. I'm just sitting there waiting with my. It's not even with the guitar. I'm like, you know, I'm just on the boat half the time. I don't even have a line in the water. And then it comes to me, and I'm like, okay, yeah. And I think when you write as simply as I do, it's not that far away ever. And I'll read a book, and then all of a sudden, okay, I'm going to write 12 songs. It's just input, output. But most of the time, no, I'm like not working on it unless I have a job. If I'm at work and I'm like, I wish I was somewhere else, I'm like, okay, I'm going to write. And I just start writing all
lyrics.
The time. Yeah.
Not even guitar.
Not even guitar, just lyrics. And I'm like, I always have something on the guitar going that I'm like, there's a song in there. I just got to find what the song is.
Right.
Because the guitar usually, like, yeah, dictates where these melodies go or whatever. But yeah, if I have a job, which I've just been doing the songwriter thing down at the King Eddie or whatever, it's been paying my rent, which is great. But when I have a job, I'm like, fuck, doesn't matter what kind of job it is. I would rather be anywhere else.
Even when you were a surly record store prick?
Yeah, when I was like working at a record store, man, and like, you know, like I remember like I started writing so much because I was like, these people would buy shit, and I'd be like, I don't even know what that is. I'm gonna look at it, and I listen to it, and I'd be like, I remember that's how I got into the Replacements. I was
cool.
like, wow, these guys are great, and I had no idea who they were just because I was so within my own worldview of tunes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd listen to that, and then I'd be like, all right, that's great. And then I got sick of just being on Facebook for like 6 hours when the store was empty after I did all the work that I could do in like, you know, full day's work in like an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be like, well, I don't want to scroll anymore. My wrist fucking hurts from pulling down on the mouse or whatever. So I'd just like start hammering words out on this. I buy those like Blue Hilroy books, you know, like 3 subjects, 300 pages. And I'm like, yeah, my goal is always to like just write whatever comes to my mind. And then usually they're just like these weird, like diary entries, just like bitching about like, I'm like, man, I hate being here, and like, Carter, get your shit together, you know, like try harder with art. And then all of a sudden it's like, like little idea will be like, oh, like a basketball player like busts his knee and works on IT, the internet, nothing but fish and net. I'm like, oh shit, there's something there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, I go home and I sit down, and you know, like in the summertime this year when I was just sending you songs.
Yeah, man, that was awesome.
Amy was out at her parents' house, and I was like, I'm gonna write. And all I did was watch baseball, and like I'd wake up in the morning, I'd be like, I'm gonna go get some chicken wings from 7-Eleven. Which is not good for you. Don't do that.
Don't do
like,
that.
You know,
You're tuned in.
Bordering on scurvy. And I would just like play guitar. The baseball game would be on. I'd watch the baseball game, and it'd be like 8 o'clock, and I'd be like, what do I do now? And I'm like, I'd shut off the lights, go in my room, turn the lamp on, and just play guitar on my bed for like till like 4 a.m. And it's so worth it, because it's like the stuff that comes out of you. Yeah, there's garbage. You know, like the one thing I started doing was like when Townes Van Zandt was like, oh, I never let a song go. I'm like, okay. So I'd write these songs. I'm like, that's terrible. But I'd send it off to you, because I'd be like, and you'd be like, yeah, you know, maybe not that one. Or like, that's a good one. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm going to work on that one. But yeah, my process is all like take it or leave it type of like, if I'm feeling it, I'll do it. And if I'm not, you know, I look at it like a job, in the sense it's like, I have like 60 songs like that I like to play, and there's like 10 that I really like. Like I'm like, these are good songs, and then there's 4 that I'm like, these are as good as anybody's songs.
Yeah,
like, these are, and I'm like, those 4 make me go like, well, fuck, I can, you know, roll over tomorrow, and if I don't get out of bed, I'm like, I did it. You know, I've accomplished artistic integrity.
But
like,
that's what keeps you going. At least it's like you know that you've done that, and you're chasing it down.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's the thing too, is when you get, you know, like I have like the biggest ego for somebody who I consider humble. There's times where I'm like, I'm fucking good. I'm a little raw. I ain't the greatest player in the world, but it's like I do more with so much less, while also doing so much less than people that get so much more. Like,
right. It's a good quote there, buddy.
Yeah, well, it's like people, you know, there's people, I'm like, I started playing guitar when I was like 17. Like, I dropped out of school, and I'd show up at school just to fucking play guitar. I'd be like, you know, it was crazy. Like, we had a huge, like, oxy problem in high school. I never touched the stuff, but these cops would roam around the parking lot trying to find dealers, right? Like people dealing pills.
Is this up in Grand Prairie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd be sitting in my car. I had a little 1986 Honda CRX with a fucking donut. I never got changed. Bumper was flying off of it. It was terrible. And I would just literally just push my seats as far back as I could, and I'd just take a pillow and stick it in the middle, and I'd sit in the middle of my car so my guitar would fit, and I'd just play. And I'd play, like, you know, from like 8 a.m, because I had 2 younger brothers that were in the same school as me. I'd take them to school. I'd never leave the school, but I never fucking went into the school either, right? And I'd just play guitar. And then, you know, when it got warmer out, and like, yeah, it cost me a lot of money because my car was running the entire time. You know, I was lucky it was a CRX, and it was like 2005 when gas was like 68 cents or whatever. But it was that was where I kind of got into playing music. And then so I dropped out of school, and then my mom found out, and she was like, well, I'm going to get you a job at the liquor store, right? And I'm like, because my mom was running a liquor store. And I was like, okay. So I'd still work the night shift, but I'd still go to the school, because my buddies would be there. There'd be guys that played guitar. I'd sit in the back of a truck, like the cow or whatever you call it, and like sing like these songs about like living in an oil town and wanting to be Corblund pretty much, you know, so that sort of thing. And then
your songs?
Yeah, they were like, I had some songs. I had this one song that was like, it was a huge hit, like at parties. It was called Oil Town. And it was like, come on down to Oil Town where we don't mess around. It was ridiculous. But I would play. I would just play and play and play. I'd go to a party, and I'd be that asshole with the guitar. Like,
but that's also like curbs the social anxiety.
Yeah,
you're the guy with the guitar.
Yeah, exactly.
I know
Changed
how
my
you feel.
life.
Yes,
Yeah, like I was like, oh yeah, I'm the guy with the guitar. And then
And you get to hang out with the hockey players and the drug kids.
Yeah, exactly.
And the chicks.
It was such a swath of like, in high school, like, you know, Amy always gives me a hard time because we grew up in the same town, and she's like, her brother was a year younger than me, and she's a couple years younger than him. Like, so she's three years younger than me. She's like, everybody liked you because you were just like, you didn't fit anywhere, but you fit in everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I always said, like, yeah, I had the hardest time because I was like, I love smoking dope, so I loved the guys who played music and like listened to music. But I loved the guys that played music, but everyone who listened to music would be like, why don't you play music? Right. So then I'd be like, fuck those guys, you know, like pick up a guitar, you know, like say something about yourself. But then I realized listening to music is an artistic endeavor in its own right. But yeah, anyways, I got a job working for my mom at this liquor store, and I would work the night shift. And this guy came in, and he had an iPod, and it was the first time I ever saw an iPod. I was like, yeah, maybe 18. And he had this country music playlist called It Ain't Country Unless a Fat Lady Sings, which is hilarious or whatever. But he had, like, it was crazy. It was like it was like Uncle Tupelo and John Prine, which was like changed my life.
You'd never heard this stuff?
Never ever heard it. Yeah, no, I grew up with like, my dad was like a huge George Thorogood fan, and my mom listened to Dr. Hook all the time. Like the weirdest thing. Like, like, is this good or is this bad? Or Terry Jacks, stuff like that. And I thought that stuff was okay. Like George Thorogood, I still like, you know, huge guilty pleasure. Like love the man. But
before you heard the John Prine and the Uncle Tupelo and stuff, what were you playing and liking at that age? I was into like,
well, it was weird. It was like, I wanted to play like, you know, pop punk music or whatever.
It was the era.
Like, oh man, everything was huge, like Bright Eyes and well, that was more like indie folk, but Dashboard Confessionals, just stuff chicks liked and stuff. I was like, all right. And it was emotional stuff. Like this guy's like screaming at the top of his lungs, and I was like, I want to sing like that. And then, I remember my buddy was like, oh man, this bar, BJ's Sports Lounge, had a Core Blunt show, and he's like, let's sneak in, and because he knew the guy who worked in the kitchen, so he walked in the door. He got us in through the kitchen, and it was crazy in there. It's like Grand Prairie Core Blunt show back then, and it was insane. And we're like, we're in, and we turned the corner, and BJ, the owner, was like, what the fuck are you doing in here? Because he knew the kid that I was sneaking in with, and we're like, oh, and he's like, you can have one beer. And he like let us stay for the show.
You're like 15, 16?
Yeah, it was wild. And that was when I was like, okay, country music is cool. It's not just like, you know, Joshua Grayson stuff, like radio country that was just brutal. Like it's still like, you know, offense. Well, yeah, no, offense. Take offense. Like
it's worse than ever.
It's worse than ever. I mean, at least, well, even back then, it was fucking garbage. Like,
but that record, like that era, Corby was getting like commercial play.
He was, like you turn on, and in Grand Prairie, he was like
big time. I bet.
A deity, man. Yeah. Like, you know, he still is. Like, and that was huge for me. I was like, man, this guy writes, he sings. Mm-hmm. And then my dad used to always wake up at like 6:30 every fucking morning and turn on CMT and blast it through the house. Sit at the table, drink coffee, not even watch the music videos. And I heard this Dwight Yoakam song, Back of Your Hand. It was like a newer one. And I was like, that's a beautiful and sad song. And then I was like, that was it. I was like, okay, I like country music. But I just couldn't write it because I didn't know anything about it. And then I was like, yeah, you know, it's like the older stuff I got into a little bit later. But, you know, like I read that outlaw biography book about Nashville in the 60s and 70s, like when Willie and Tom Paul Glaser and all them were like, let's get out of here and do what we want to do. But yeah, this guy introduced me to like newer alternative country, and obviously John Prine, which is like, if you listen to me, you're like, oh yeah, that guy like, huge, never gets off the John Prine, which is true. Like if I'm like, hey Google, play, I'm like, Common Sense, and then it's like, hey Google, play John Prine, like every day. I listen
still.
To like, yeah, oh yeah, like I never get sick of him.
Are you worried that influences you too much? That's because the first time I heard you, I was like, man, this guy likes John Prine.
Yeah, I mean, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah,
you know, like there's a side of it where I'm like, I'm surprised more people don't like blatantly just ride sounding like John Prine.
Well, I think it's a lot harder than people think it is.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the one thing that was John Prine that really made me attracted to him is not only his songwriting, but the fact that he sounded like a human being singing, and that he made it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, Gary. Gary, he's at the end of the bar. He had a fucking record deal, and it's like, and he turned out to be John Prine.
It's not like he's like a traditional sense, like a great singer or anything like
he's
that.
Just a man. That was what got me into like, okay, I'm not gonna try to like do falsettos and like sing. I'm gonna just do what I do.
Tell the
and then I
stories.
kind of found my voice or whatever, and tell stories. Yeah. And that's where it all kind of started. And I was lucky growing up in an oil town or whatever, because an industry town is like, people, they don't get hurt. They don't fucking care about your feelings whatsoever. They'll tell you right to your face.
Yeah, it's tough up there, hey?
A rough town, yeah. And it was like, it was worth it. I remember the first time I ever got like a huge critique was this girl. My friend was like a really good guitar player, and his girlfriend or whatever, she was like 2 years older than him. She was going to RDC, the music program, and she came up to me. She's like, you sing so fucking flat. She's like, open your mouth more and just like sing louder.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't know what to say. I was heartbroken, whatever. So I went home and I was like, fuck, I'm going to sing louder. And I just started trying harder, right? And I'm probably still flat. I don't give a shit. But it was like, it helped.
Yeah.
And then one time I did a open mic, and this guy came up to me. He's like, he's like, if you have to tell a story before you play the song's not any fucking good. And I was like,
interesting.
That's kind of a good point. Like, if you have to explain the song. And that made me dial back like the poetics and just try to be like, okay, let's just try to hit on visceral feelings, like everyday shit that is devastating or completely like makes you think, like, yeah.
So you get hip to John Prine, you sneak into a Core Blund show, you're just starting to play, and you're writing songs at this point, and and there's no musical background in the house.
Zero. Like, I never knew. My grandpa had a guitar, but I never seen him play it. He died when I was like 7. Like, I didn't really know him. Like, but he had this little like toy, like paper mache hunker, and I used to beat on it. It had one string on it. I'd fiddle around with it. But never. Like, like I've never, I used to think my dad sang the backups for George Thorogood and that move it on over. Like, I always thought that was my dad, because it did sound like my dad when he'd go, move it. Like, trying to get me to get out of bed and get my shit together.
Yeah.
So I was like, but yeah, no. And then like my auntie is like she's a karaoke star, but she's like no bands or whatever. Like, great singer. She owned an amazing karaoke machine with like the laser discs. Yeah. Oh my God. She'd come like from, she'd
big
come
parties
into town, and it was wild. Like, I remember being a kid and being like, Mom and Dad are still not in bed, and the sun would be coming up because they'd be singing karaoke. But I was like, they weren't singers by any means. Like, no, I never heard my dad or mom sing a note in my life,
When did you start, like, when did you first do a gig? Like, what, do you remember that?
My first gig, oh man, I remember my first, I opened for a punk band.
Solo Carter Felker.
Yeah, years in a basement. My buddy, his name was Jeremy. He could shred. He still can shred. Like, he's a great player. He was like the son of a priest, preacher, I don't know. I'm not religious, whatever they're called. And they would do these basement shows, and they were fucking wild.
Prairie.
Oh, they were insane. Like, I watched a guy throw a flying V, and it like stuck into a wall. It was hilarious. Like, and they're like, Carter, you got a good voice. You want to open? I was like, yeah, sure. I was my first show, and that was like, holy shit. Like,
how old were you?
17, 18.
Playing
and then
your songs? Cover
yeah,
songs?
I didn't know. I picked up the guitar to play my shit.
Right.
I never wanted.
Yeah.
That's like, I think that maybe this makes me a writer. I was never like, oh, I want to sing these cover songs. Like, I just started as soon as I could learn it. Like, I remember it was like G, E minor, and D. I'm like, what songs can I write?
Tons.
Yeah, and there's like, it's endless, man. Like,
so no cover band, no
none of
like that
no.
in your life. Just always doing your thing.
Yeah, and I played a lot, like just at parties, just hanging out. Like, and I would always do these like freestyles or whatever.
Yeah.
I'd make fun of everyone in the room or whatever. They were like pretty much roasts. I can't believe I got away with some of the stuff without getting punched out. But and then I'm like, Amy moved to Calgary, and she's like, I'm going to Calgary. You should come visit me. And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah. Like, I'm going to come down and see you because she's great. And this is 2009. And she's like, you're really good. Like, you got to believe in yourself, like, and, stop writing about, like, parties and start writing about some real shit, Do you ever cry? Do you ever get mad? And that was a big challenge. And I'd go, and then we went to an open mic, and it was, like, this open mic at this cafe, and it was, like, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty good. And these guys in Calgary that, like, grew up playing around people that actually play guitar, they were fucking, and, like, to me at the time, I was like, I'm not getting up on stage. They're like, I remember because I signed up, I was like 17th on the list, and it's like 11, it's like show starts, it's like 7 o'clock fucking open mic. It's like 11:30 by the time I get up there. I'm like, Carter Felker. And I'm sitting at the back, and I'm like, let's go. I'm not playing. I was just totally like destroyed. I'm like, I'm not any good, right? I'm like, I thought I was going to move to Calgary and like be a big star, because that's what you do. You know, you move to Seatown, and the next thing you know, it's the Ryman. But I was like, so I went home and I like had a breakdown. I was like,
you didn't play that night?
No, I didn't play. I didn't play at all. I went home and I practiced for 2 years. Like, I cried. I threw away I lost my flat picks. They were pencil thin white ones. Zip, 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 zip. Yeah. Those ones. Fucking chucked those away. And then I remember I heard, I was like, I'm going to learn to pick a John Prine song or whatever. And then I was like, oh, that's great. So we went back to the open mic, and I felt pretty good. I was like, all right. And then same open mic. It was hot open mic. Still has an open mic. It's at this place called Cafe Koi or whatever. And kept doing it. And like, I would always kind of do one of my own songs, which were, whatever. But I'd always learn like a song that I considered hard to play to see if I could perform it. Like, every week I'd be like learning like a finger-picked John Prine song or a Steve Earle song or something like. And then I remember I got a job selling timeshares. It's the fucking worst. Yeah. I remember I'd go to work every day and be like, today's the day. I'm throwing myself in front of the C train. I'm not going in, right? And then finally I had enough. And I would just call my grandma. I'm like, hey, grandma, come pick me up. And I'd tell Amy I was going to work. Oh. And she found out. And she's like, you stay at your grandma's, right? And I'm like, oh, fuck. And I'm like sitting there all down and trodden on my grandma's hide-a-bed. And I was like, this song came to me that was like this about this breakup or whatever. And I like was like, Amy, I wrote this song. And I'm like, meet me at the open mic. And it was like, I was the first song I ever wrote that I finger-picked or whatever. And I'm like, this is a song for my gal. I know I really hurt her. And I played this song, and Amy was like, wept. And she's like, that is the best thing you've ever written. And I was like, all was forgiven, right? I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe I got to put my heart on the line. And that was it. And after that, it was like, a few more years. I was working at a guitar store, and they fired me unceremoniously for being a shitty salesman. And my girlfriend was like, you know what? Do some shows. Like, do more shows. Like, get out there. Like, I'll find you some shows. And then out of nowhere, she was doing this clothes market, and she's like, I put your name in to play. And I fucking lost my mind. I was like, what are you doing? I'm not ready. Yeah. It was a huge fight. And it was like, and then I got addicted to it. I'm like, I'm playing my own songs for people that are like, there's 4 of them in here that are looking at me. That's good enough. I don't give a shit. And after that, it was like this band, my buddies, Rotary Park, like my buddy Matt Caldwell.
I remember those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. He's in Toronto now, and he's he's in the scene.
He's a good musician.
Great musician. Yeah. He's like a brother to me. He started always asking me to open shows for them and play with them. And that was it. Like, and then it was like, 2015 or 2016, 2015, I started to really get real serious about it. Like, I was only playing music for money, but it was like, you get a good gig, and then you'd be playing fucking Original Joe's for $75 and like on half off Wine Wednesdays or whatever. Everyone's pissed. Nobody's listening. But that stuff's worth it. It makes you realize, like,
those are the stories we tell each other.
Yeah.
Backstage are not the good gigs.
Yeah, you're no one. Like, when was the last time someone was like, yeah, I was here, and it's like the greatest story. You're like, fuck that guy. Why is he bragging? He's like, you ever go like, remember that time that guy, you cracked your orbital bone with that pint? You're like, oh yeah, he threw it across the stage because I wouldn't play Merle Haggard. Yeah, like that's
That's the stories.
Yeah, that's the stuff I like to hear. But yeah, so then I just started getting into it. Yeah, and I just was like, and I got really lucky too, like really, really lucky. I had opened for a local gem. His name's Scott McLeod, good friend of mine.
Good guy.
Yeah, great guy, one of the
Scott
best.
for a long time.
He had just released a record. I think it was Right as Rain. Great record. It was produced by Steve Laurie. And Skinny Dick played on it.
Yeah, they did that one in Nanton.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And he's like, hey, you want to open this show? And I was like, great, yeah, whatever. And I met Skinny Dick.
Mm-hmm.
And Skinny, being a steely-eyed, sexy bastard that he is just sitting there. No smiles. It's drier than hell, right?
Looks like he's sour all the time.
Yeah, and he's like, hey, nice job. Real hard up there. Real hard. And I was like, all right, whatever. He's like, let me know if you ever need anything. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. See ya.
Yeah.
Like, I thought he was baked or something. I don't know. And then I'm like, I got to get out of the city. So I contacted him like, hey, like, if you can help me get a show in Lethbridge, it'd be much appreciated. He's like, yeah, let me get back to you. He's like, I got us a 3-day run. I'm like, us? He's like, yeah, I'm going to play steel with you. And that was that. Like, his first side guy, real professional.
That's
like,
where I first heard you, was some videos of you guys in Nanton. At
yeah,
the auditorium.
The auditorium. And that was crazy, too, because that was the thing. He's like, I got you a 3-setter at the odd. And I had like maybe like...
I got you a 3-setter at the odd.
I'm like, oh, God. I'm like, I remember the end of the night, I'm like reaching into a barrel. Like, I had this 8-minute song that was just a depressing song about like love lost or whatever. And he's like, you got to find a bass player, too. And I was like, I don't know. I've never met a bass player or I've ever talked. I don't know how to recruit a band. The band found me, right? Like you... And so we played the odd, and then that was the first time I ever had an upright bassist, and, you know, that was cool. And that guy ended up helping me make my first record. And that was that. Yeah. Like,
it all kind of took off quick.
Yeah, I got lucky.
Point,
yeah.
right?
I feel like I feel like I was good enough for it to happen because of, you know, I believed in like the craft and putting your time in and stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, you know, I kind of showed up. I got lucky, and like, as far as like, it went from like playing like OJs and, you know, these shitty gigs, and then I got lucky with Skinny, and then I got really lucky. I won a song competition that the Folk Fest puts on, which got me into the Calgary Folk Fest, and then that got me into the full festival the year after, and then that was it. Like everything, and I was like, okay,
and
yeah,
you're a Calgary guy.
Yeah, now you know, whatever, Calgary guy. Like, and you know, I feel like, you know, I got an okay name across. I've toured a little bit. I'm gonna start touring more here. 2 years like stuck in your house makes you realize you gotta, you know, you live once.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I've done BC and back a bunch of times, and Alberta a few times, and
safe to say that Amy is like your biggest fan and your harshest critic.
Yeah, big time.
And you guys, because she's fantastic.
Yeah, she's amazing.
I'm a huge fan. But you guys write together, or are you holding each other accountable for what you're writing?
Yes.
So she got out of Grand Prairie like a smart person as soon as she could.
Yeah, she was like, you know, like
after high school.
Well, actually, what happened with her was she hated it. Like, she came out of the womb despising the place she grew up in, which, you know, I had a thing where I was like, this is a great town. And then, you know, you start to, the older you get and the more you see, the more you go like, holy shit, this is a rough place, you know. Great people, salt of the earth, tough. You know, some of the shit that I've seen, like, you know, people are, you know, it's a rough neighborhood. I'm like, Grand Prairie is a rough neighborhood. The whole town, like, you know, like... You know, like, you're from a tough town. The Peg is tough, you know. Like,
I grew up in Oshawa.
Oshawa's tough town, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, young people with money or whatever. But yeah, she had a brother. She still has a brother. Great guy, Sam. He's a great baseball player. He got recruited to play college, so he left to play at the U of C, playing baseball. And the family was like, well, fuck, let's go.
Wow.
And she was like, let's go, like jumping for joy. And then a couple like months later, she's like, you should come down. So yeah, she bailed like right away as soon as she could. Like, she would have left if they wouldn't have left, she would have left.
And you guys been together since you were kids?
Yeah, I was 19, she was 17. Yeah, around there.
Wow.
Yeah, we were neighbors.
Yeah.
Dad was my ball coach. Her mom was like my unpaid therapist. Like, I'd go over to her house, talk to her mom for hours. Tracy Nelson.
You guys are still close, eh?
Yeah,
with
her
the
mom's
family?
like the best. Yeah, her dad is hilarious. I love the guy. And her mom got me into some really great music that I never even like Leonard Cohen and Don McLean
Nice.
and Cat Stevens and
So she's the reason you end up in Calgary, and then
Yeah.
again it pushes you into it. You run into all these people, and then you make everyday life. Like this is the
Pretty
thread.
much.
Amy's the thread.
yeah, Amy is a thread. I'd say like the biggest thing with Amy was like always like challenging me, like, you know, that's not good enough, or that's, you know, that sort of thing. And then we sang together at the beginning a bit, but we're fire and ice, you know, like
Very different artists.
Yeah, and that's the best part about it. Like, you know, like I can hear a good song come out of her that she would throw away. Like she's got this song "Paint an Old Fence" on her record that she's like scrolling through this like ancient pink laptop right before she's about to make her record, and there's all these clips, voice clips. I remember her playing it. I went, what's that song? Oh, she's like, whatever. And to me, it's the best song on her record. It's so well put together, heartbreaking, you know. But I was like, she's like, well, it's too country or whatever, and I'm like, that don't matter. It's like word for word. It's the best song. I still love that song passionately. She never plays it live. And people are like, are you going to play that song? There's like so many like divorced women that are like, that song meant so much to me. And I'm like, holy shit. But yeah, Amy's the thread. I made Everyday Life, and I made it twice. I had a real huge issue. I did it down in Lethbridge with Skinny and his crew, and did not go well.
You didn't like how it turned out?
Not at all. No,
Okay.
I didn't like, you know, I was so inexperienced too, that type of environment with like real people that are like trying to be professional, but also still lacking on their technical side. Like I didn't know what the Nashville number system was, or so I had some fucking breakdowns. Like I
Really?
remember going into the booth and screaming at fucking Taylor, just yelling at the top of my lungs, and Taylor, chill as he is, turns, he's like, maybe we should take a break. And then I walk outside, I'm like petting this horse, and I'm like screeching. I'm like, you know, having my Carter at like 120% like rage fest, which it's rare. Skinny's seen it a bunch. Maybe it's Skinny. Maybe that's a common denominator. He knows how to push my buttons. But he also knows how to read me when he's like, hey, let's go for a walk or whatever. But yeah, and then I was like, I didn't know what I was doing. Like I couldn't be recorded. I had red light fever. Like it was brutal. Like, and it was more on me. Like I drank a lot of beer and smoked a lot of dope because I didn't know. I was scared.
Inexperienced.
Yeah, and you know,
Intimidated.
Yeah, and you're like, you want to be a rock star, right? And then so it like we got the mixes on the January. It was like the first. It was like New Year's Day, I remember, and I was like, yeah, this ain't gonna come out. Like, I can't release this. And they were like, come on, Carter, you know, and I had paid for it, whatever. So I was like, well, I'm in the clear. I don't owe you anything, so let's just not do it. Mm-hmm. And I showed it to my band at the time, and they were really honest with me. They were like, Kent McAllister is playing guitar for me. He's a veteran, great, has made some great records out on the West Coast or whatever. He was like, this isn't good, man. This does not sound good. And I was like, okay. And then my bass player, his name's Morgan Lachinsky, super good guy, was like, we'll make it in my father-in-law's basement in Chestermere. I'll find the mics. I know how to work Pro Tools. We'll do it. And I was January, like the 16th we started. We finished on like February 1st. The album release was like March 4th. I'm like, got the masters that my buddy in Vancouver did. He's not a guy who does masters. He probably just pushed the volume button up. Yeah. Mixes were fine, whatever. Like, you know, I could take whatever. But and then I got the CDs like the 3rd of March, right? And then the next day was
the show,
right? And I was happy with it. You know, I got it out. Yeah, that's all that mattered to me.
Mm-hmm. But there's a little buzz that followed. Like, was the album before the Folk Fest stuff and the songwriting competition?
It was right. It was after the. It was before the Calgary Folk Fest, the full festival.
Okay,
but it was
so you'd already
after I
done the
won
competition.
the thing.
Was the song that you won Everyday Life?
No, it's the one. It's Drink the Water.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that one was like. It was weird when I wrote that one. I'm like, everyone's gonna eat that up. I'm
yeah.
Like, that's you know, it's life advice. You know, it's everyone. You know, it's like, you know. Yeah, I had a feeling. I'm like, if I put this in a competition, I got a good shot.
Mm-hmm. And you won.
Yeah, and I was like, still to this day, I'm like, I've never had a performance where I was like in the zone like that, where I'm like, where I walked on stage. Well, it was funny. I was joking with my buddy about this band that was already in the festival, and they were playing the competition, and you get into the festival because you win, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck? They're already in the Calgary Folk Fest. What are they doing there? And we were making a joke about it, right? It was totally fun. And this guy fucking turned to me, and he like slapped me on my chest. And I was like, oh, here we go. We're just gonna I don't take kindly to that shit, right? And he goes like, well, yeah, it's bullshit. You'd say stuff like that. And my buddy Darren's like, we're kidding around, like, and he's like the MC of the night. We're joking around, and the guy goes like, who do you think's gonna win? And I was like pissed. I'm like, I'm gonna fucking win. And I was like, I gotta win now.
Yeah,
like, I gotta fucking win.
Yeah, you're betting on yourself.
Yeah,
hard
and I was
there,
like
eh?
such a dink, right?
Yes.
And it was like straight out of a movie. Like they call my name, I win. I step 1 foot off the stage, and it's this fucking guy. I look him right in the eyes, and I go, I told you. And I was like, man, I'm such an arrogant prick. But I just like, I never in my life needed to win something more because of that moment. I was like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have been joking like that, and I got caught.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck. But now I'm like, now I got to prove this prick wrong. But yeah, so stuff did happen fast. Like I don't know, like Alison Brock really helped me out. Like she is a really super popular in the province, wide cut country. She's the only person I sent the record to.
Really?
Literally, I had no idea how to release a record.
Yeah.
And she played every track, like except for the ones with some F-bombs or whatever. And then Skinny kind of sent it around. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know. It really took off and helped me out. I think mostly it took off with like songwriters mostly, and people on the road were like, this guy's pretty good. Like, because I would give it away. Like, I'd be like, hey,
Business
Sean
card.
Burns, here you go. Or Del Barber, take this. Or, I would just hand them out. I would never sell a record to like a musician. Now I would. I need the money. Well, come on, man. Yeah.
Especially now more than ever. We're all like buying merch off of each other.
Yeah, and it's cool. Like,
Yeah.
But that, like, and then it's like, I didn't expect anybody to be like, like the critical side of it, like, like CQA and Scott Franchuk, like, voted into his, like, essential albums of the year. Alison Brock did. And like,
nice.
It was on a list. I mean, I don't know. I didn't get paid for the list or whatever, but it's cool to have your name on it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, yeah, it took off.
2016 it came out?
Yeah, that's a long time ago now.
I was going to say, so why 6 years? Like,
I hated the studio. I had such a terrible experience that it's like I couldn't fathom going back in. I didn't want to go in.
I never enjoyed it either until the last few years.
Yeah.
And even still. Like I've had like vocal booth breakdowns like that where you're just like, oh man, now these people have seen this side of me I never wanted them to see.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh man, you take off your mask and they're like, you're not cool anymore, dude. And you're like, oh fuck.
So that was it. There's just that anxiety about recording.
And I have anxiety. Like I have, I mean, I've gotten better, like, a lot better over the last few years, but I have like terrible anxiety for situations that are outside of my control. Mm-hmm. And, I like click tracks. Oh my God. Like, I just learned that I could play with one like this, like making this record. I'm like, oh, I'm a better guitar player than I thought. I can stay on time. Like,
did you have a good time making this new record?
I had a blast. It was the best thing I've done in years. Like, it was cool. And it's another thing where it's like somebody forced me into the studio. I had all these songs. And then my grandma, who I stayed with, love her, rest in peace, she died. And she left me a little bit of money, like not a shit ton by any means, but like enough to at least track, even if it was like a couple days. Like, it was, $5,000, I don't know, 5,000, I don't know. But I was like, I have this pedal steel player named JJ Mayo, and he's always been like, are we going to go in the studio? We're going to go. And then one day he's like, I'm going to Moncton. So it's pandemic, so I may never be back. I don't know. If you want to make this record, let's go. I just called this guy. His name's Pat Pilardi. He owns a studio, Public Lunch. He wants to meet. And then I like told him my budget, and he gave me like a ridiculous deal.
Nice. Like,
really helped me out. And it was like, I don't know. He's like, I like your songs. So I was like, okay. And then we got 10 days in the studio. And it was awesome. Like, it was like fun. I mean, the first day was brutal. Like, of course. Because I'm like freaking out and not ready. And like, here we go again. And like starting to spiral. And then as soon as we got that first, he's like, the first guy I've ever worked with who's like, I'll comp it together. Like, don't worry about your vocals. We'll comp all the good parts together. We'll see how it sounds. I remember stepping out of the booth. He's like, yeah, done. Let's listen to it. And I was like, oh shit, I can relax. Like, we're gonna get it. Mm-hmm. And then that was that. Like, I was like, let's go. Like, we finished like most of the tracking and everything, and like way before we thought we were gonna finish it. Then we had a COVID scare. We were worried that somebody had COVID, and this was before the vaccines. So we had to take a couple days off, and I had a bunch of gear in my car, and in my panic, got stolen out of my car. I went home, called her Amy. I'm like, I'm fucking gonna die. You know, I had no idea. So I was like in my house that night, like having an existential crisis, and my gear got stolen out of my car. Nothing expensive. Like I had a couple shitty mics. I wasn't too stressed about it, but it was a bad couple of days. I was like, but it, you know. And then he's like, yeah, my wife, the doctor said she's good to go or whatever. And I'm like, we're back in the studio, finished it. Then it took forever to mix. Like it took like a year and a half, 2 years almost.
So this is early pandemic you're recording?
We're talking September 2020, yeah.
Okay.
Things were looking good. We're like, we're getting through this pandemic. Then it spiked right after that, yeah. And then I went through I had a different engineer working on it. And then I felt like he was really busy. Like just because, I mean, probably was working on stuff. So he was like, I don't know if I'm the man for the job, which was fine. Totally agreed. Still good. Mm-hmm. And then Pat took it back on. And Pat's different. Like, you know, he's got a totally different approach to music than I do. But he listens to the references. Like, if you're like, hey, I want it to sound like this, he's like, all right, let's try it. And he took his time and like got it right and did a great job. And then it was done, you know, and then I got it mastered by my buddy Jeff Kynock, you know Jeff. Yeah. And then now I'm just waiting to put it out, and it's coming out on the 14th. It's called Even the Happy Ones Are Sad.
It's a great title, and it's a great record. I've had you know, you sent it to me 2 months ago.
Yeah.
It still sounds like you, but it definitely sounds different than the first one.
Yeah, I think you got to evolve.
Yes.
You got to change it up. I mean, I could go back and do exactly what I did before and probably be pretty happy.
Yes.
But I've always like been like obsessed with 70s songwriters, you know, like Danny O'Keefe and, you know, Harry Nilsson and all that stuff. I'm like, those were like where I was like leaning. I'm like, okay, like if you hear anything like that sounds cool, like there's like, you know, Great Speckled Bird songs and stuff that I'm like, these are some references that I'm like, you know, let's go. Like, and then he's like, okay, well, I could get a tape machine, but then he's like, the tape machine you got was fucked, so whatever. So he's like, but yeah, near the end, he's like, hey, I bought this new plugin. It's called the Wow Effect. So it's got the tape warble. Yeah. And I was like, juice it up, daddy. Like, let's throw that on everything. Let's go. And so, yeah.
You're happy with it?
Yeah, I'm happy with it. I mean, it's like if I'm not, you know, it's like everything you do, it's like the second you're done, you're like, what could I have done different? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty jazzed. And I mean, for what we did and Under the Duress, like my pedal steel player played drums. He's not a drummer.
Right.
My bass player at the time played like every auxiliary fucking instrument you can imagine. Like there's 3 of us because they were like, COVID, we're not taking a risk. And then like JJ pretty much produced it, like the pedal steel player. Like I yay or nayed things, but he had a bunch of ideas. Like he's like glockenspiel and kielbasa or whatever you call that thing, the sausage that you shake. Yeah, and then we got it done. But yeah, like we were lucky. I'm happy. Like I'm pretty pumped about it, and we kept it simple, and we didn't have to change too much. Like there's one song that we really went kind of wild on. It's the second track on the record, that Party Pooper, because it was like, yeah, I was just like having an issue with playing it the way I wanted to play it, and I'm like, let's just do something different, and then we did it. I think the one thing is there's a lot of room still. Like when you listen to it, like you listen to records and people are like, they got to fill up every space.
Yeah, you don't have to, man. Space is so effective.
Yeah, and I think we did a really good job of leaving it pretty wide open and not getting too like...
Well, especially with your kind of songs.
Yeah, I think you got to do that.
Had you had these songs kicking around for a long time? Like 6 years is a long time.
I had, there's songs that I was like, they were going to be on the first record and they just got cut.
Wow. So you've been playing these live too for a long time?
Oh, forever, yeah.
So this is not a surprise. People come see you on this tour next month, and
they'll know the songs. There's a couple new ones, like the single I released. I wrote that right before the pandemic. I was going to quit my job.
Living Free.
Yeah,
I love that song, man.
I was going to be like, I'm out of here. I'm done. I'm going on the road. was working at the record store.
And you're like-
and we were planning on coming out to Winnipeg for
Oh, yeah,
that
we
June.
had booked you to come in June.
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, I'm done. I'm gonna quit. That'll be like I'm going east. I'm gonna finally make it to Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Get booed off the stage and just go, you know?
Just get booed off
Yeah.
the stage. They're not going to boo you off the stage.
Yeah. But I was like, yeah, that's it. I'm going to put in my 2 weeks here. And it was like, and I wrote that song. Amy's out at the Banff Center. I'm like, well, Amy's not home for a month. I'm going to write. And I wrote like a shit ton, like tons of music.
Keepers.
I couldn't believe it. They were just falling out of me. Like from that like 3 week period of like when Amy left on the 2nd to like when she got back on like the 20th, 22nd, before like after they kicked everybody out of there and was like, yeah, get out of here. COVID. I was like in the zone. Like I don't know what happened. I think maybe it was just the first time in maybe 7 years or whatever that we had been apart for an extended period of time, and I was actually not the one gone. You know, I was in my own home and comfortable, so I had these songs in me. But yeah, Living Free came out of that. The Bad Guy came out of that. Nothing But Net came out of that. And then I was like, yeah, and then it was like the September after that, all those songs made it on the record because they were fresh and they were good and I liked them. But there's songs like Hard Times I wrote like way before, even before the first record. I wrote it like after I had a conversation with my brother about like same idea. Like I went to an open mic and there were some guys there that I was like, they're so good. And I was like, I don't want to do music and I think maybe I should come back to Grand Prairie. And he was like, dude, he's like, you don't want to come back. And I was like, well, he's like, there's nothing here for you. And then I was like, okay. And then, songs like, Francine, like, was the last cut from the Everyday Life.
You got a good little run there in June. Tell the folks that are listening.
Yeah, I'm going through
you're going to be here in Alberta.
I'm doing Medicine Hat. Do you want me to name the places?
You don't have to. You can if you want. You
I'm
doing
on
the Bruco?
The Bruco, yeah. You were the one who told me that was a nice little spot.
Good gig, good food.
I can't wait to try it. Great beer too.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you don't drink, but
I'm sure it's good.
Oh man,
good merch.
Delicious. Yeah. And then Medicine Hat at the Bruco, Lethbridge. This will be the June 16th. The Slice.
Yep.
Little iconic bar down in Lethbridge, Alberta. Friday at the Ironwood. That's the hometown release. I'll have a full band. Yeah, I'll have the drummer and the keys and whatever else we got. And then Saturday I'm in Edmonton doing a matinee at the Black Dog. Gonna have a real blast.
Yeah, you are.
Then Sunday I'm going out to Vermilion. I'm playing the Copper Cork Distillery. And then I have a couple days off, and then it's like back down. It's we're doing a Wednesday at the Velvet Olive in Red Deer.
They've done a lot with that room, man.
Yeah.
Have you been there lately?
No, I haven't been there. I know Kyle pretty well.
He's
great
done a
guy.
great job, man.
Yeah, he's been a big adamant of the scene out in Red Deer.
Yeah.
And they used to have like per capita the most amount of nice rooms. Like
they used to have so many gigs. There's so many gigs there.
I
Most
know.
of them are shitty, but there's tons of them.
It's a tough town too. Like there's times where I'm there and I'm like, you know, like it's considering you're wedged right between like two major metropolitan like centers. Like this is a tough town.
Yep.
Tough people, lots of opinions.
Oh yeah, man. Central Alberta's
it's the
Wild West.
Twilight Zone up there, man. But playing there, and Kyle's great, yeah. And then I'm in Vulcan. Vulcan's got a new gig. If you're ever looking to play, check out 9 in a Line Brewing.
Yeah.
Dan Anderson, hell of a guy. He's a part owner there. They're great. It's great. It's great to be out in Vulcan because my dad's mom's family's from out there. And then we're at Joe Vickers' place. You know Joe Vickers out in Drumheller on a Friday. And then, we might fill out a Saturday show, but we might just call it right there and just go home and kick our feet up. And then I'm back at the Eddy on the 26th of June. And I got Dennis Bowman join me out from he's out in Powell River now. He's coming. He's on tour. So he's going to join me and sing some songs. And then in September, I'm doing a run out your way.
Yeah, you are, man.
Yeah, I used you as the old anchor date. And then,
we're really excited about that. You'll be with us at the Times Changed High and Lonesome Club on September 24th.
Yeah.
And the T&A Garage on the Sunday afternoon. They'll treat us real good.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited.
Terry Friesen, good Mennonite guy.
Oh,
They're
man,
real
I
nice
can't.
folks. Where can people find you on the internet? Is there a website or?
Bandcamp's probably my preferred locale, but
Yeah.
Spotify, iTunes, Carter Felker. There ain't many of us.
And the record comes out June 14th.
Yes.
Even the happy ones are sad.
Yeah, and I have a new single coming out May 13th. It's Nothing But Net.
Nothing but that's a good one too, buddy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for coming by the Alt Hotel here to have a little chat for the Northern Report.
Thank you for letting me ramble.
I love it. Maybe we should go to 7-Eleven and get some chicken wings.
Oh, that's gourmet. Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, buddy. Thanks,
All
pal.
right. Thanks, man.
Well, friends, I hope that you enjoyed my chat with Carter Felker. Thank you, Carter, for taking the time to share your story with us. Listen to Carter Felker wherever you're streaming music for a nominal monthly fee, or check him out and show your support at carterfelker.bandcamp.com. Look for the new album, Even the Happy Ones Are Sad, out this Tuesday, June 14th. And stick around here for a moment, friends. We're about to premiere a song from the record called Francine. Follow along with the Northern Report Spotify playlist, where you can hear music from the folks that I've covered in the Honky-Tonk Times column, as well as right here on the podcast. Subscribe, like, follow, share, tell a friend, leave us a rating for the Northern Report. It goes a long way for the podcast, and I appreciate you taking a moment to help us out. Our logo was created by Boots Graham of Boots and the Hoots. Music on today's show courtesy of Carter Felker, Sean Burns and Lost Country, The Divorcees, and Skinny Dick. From local legends to regional stars to the cream of the Canadian crop, you're going to find it all here on the Northern Report. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll chat later. Hey man, what do you got for me?
If you can't undo the wrong, throw a baseball through his window and undo the right.
Well, they found her on the corner, her name was Francine. 26 years old, a mother to be. She had a tattoo on her shoulder, read Forever Dean. 50 in her pocket and a broken rosary. Ain't nothing like a murder to stir up a town. All the doors they get locked, the shades they come down. Then the sheriff says the perpetrator's been found, and it all gets forgotten about. 'Cause it's 1750 to go to the zoo, 25 if you include the ice cream too. When you could stay home and watch the news, but you probably just get the blues. Well, Francine was a good girl, she never did no wrong. She was a saint until the day she was gone. Went out one night and didn't come back at dawn. Her mama knew something was wrong. She'd been fighting with her estranged ex-husband Dean. He'd been shooting up instead of paying alimony. A real ripe fruit from a violent tree. Dean was known to get rough with Francine, but the trail's too far to go for a hike, and it wouldn't feel right drinking on a Monday night. So the man on the screen says, coming up live, we'll take you to the scene of the crime. Well, the cops caught Dean just north of Duluth. They asked him the question, they wanted the truth. Dean denied, but it weren't no use. Forensics had all the proof. So they threw up a jury and a verdict was found for laying his pregnant ex-wife in the ground. Dean Chinaski was to be put down on a date they did not announce. And it's a big cruel rock, be right round the sun. Trouble